deep beneath Pearl Harbor, in a windowless room that stinks of stale coffee and nervous sweat. A group of exhausted men stare at sheets of paper covered in numbers that refuse to make sense. It's April 18, 1942, just 4 months after the attack that dragged America into war, and Commander Joseph Rochefort knows his team is running out of time. The mathematicians hunched over these desks are some of the brightest minds the Navy could find. Yale graduates, code-breaking veterans, men who've dedicated years to unraveling the mystery of Japan's naval cipher. But they're losing. Every intercept they capture, every message they decode feels like trying to grab smoke with their bare hands. The code they're fighting is called JN25, and it's a monster. 33,000 possible code groups, each one representing a word or a location or a ship's name, and even if you crack those groups, they're hidden beneath layers of random numbers that change every few weeks, like a lock that grows new tumblers every time. You think you've figured it out. It's a cipher wrapped inside another cipher, and it's bleeding the Pacific Fleet dry. Since December, the Japanese have torn through American defenses like a tsunami. Wake Island, gone. Guam, fallen. The Philippines are collapsing, and nobody can predict where the enemy will strike next. American submarines patrol blind through thousands of miles of empty ocean, while Japanese carriers hit with terrifying precision. The numbers don't lie. For every Japanese ship that goes down, 3 American vessels sink to the bottom. Admiral Nimitz needs answers. He needs to know where the enemy fleet is heading. But all his intelligence officers can do is point at a map and guess. Would none of these men know what they can't possibly imagine on this humid Hawaiian morning is that salvation won't come from their ranks. It won't come from the Ivy League professors or the seasoned cryptographers who've spent decades mastering their craft. The breakthrough they desperately need is about to come from a kid who shouldn't even be wearing that uniform. A 17-year-old who lied his way into the Navy, with a fake birth certificate and a voice that still cracks when he gets nervous. His name is Andrew Gleason, and in 6 weeks, this teenager will do what all the experts couldn't. He'll find the crack in Japan's Unbreakable code, expose the location of their entire fleet, and hand America its greatest naval victory of the war. But first, he has to convince a roomful of officers that a kid who's supposed to be filing papers has spotted something they've been missing for over a year. The clock is counting down, the Japanese are planning something massive, and nobody wants to listen to the boy who isn't even old enough to vote. To understand why JN25 felt like an unsolvable puzzle, you need to see its brutal elegance up close. The Japanese Navy rolled out this cipher on June 1, 1939, specifically designed to resist every trick Western codebreakers knew. Unlike simple substitution codes that swap letters for letters, JN25 operates in 2 crushing stages that compound each other's complexity. First, Japanese messages get encoded using a massive codebook containing 33,000 5-digit number groups. The word battleship becomes 15,347. Tomorrow transforms into 29,018. Locations and ship names and tactical orders all converted into anonymous strings of digits. Even if you intercept the message, you're staring at sequences like 1534729, 018444213 that mean absolutely nothing without the codebook in your hands. But the Japanese knew that wasn't enough. They knew that if Americans ever captured one of their codebooks, and this had happened before with German materials seized from captured vessels in late 1940, the whole system would crumble overnight. So they added a second brutal layer: additive encryption. Before transmission, radio operators add random 5-digit numbers from separate additive tables to each code group, which means 15,347 might become 48092, or 91,034, or any of billions of possible combinations, depending on which additive table is being used that day. And those tables changed constantly, every few weeks, sometimes every few days, ensuring that even if you figured out yesterday's key, today's messages remained dark. The mathematics are devastating. Even with captured equipment and 6 months of intercepted messages to work with, Agnes Driscoll, the Navy's legendary codebreaker known as Madame X, the woman who'd shattered previous Japanese codes with surgical precision, made virtually no progress against JN25. By early 1942, the code-breaking unit could read maybe 1% of intercepted traffic. And most of that was old news about operations that had already happened. The messages that mattered, current fleet positions. Upcoming attacks, operational plans, stayed locked behind walls of meaningless numbers. The experts had thrown everything they had at this problem. They'd built massive frequency analysis tables, attempted statistical attacks on thousands of messages, searched for repeated patterns that might reveal structure beneath the chaos. Mathematicians from Princeton and Yale worked 16-hour shifts until their eyes bled and nothing worked. The additive tables scrambled everything into what looked like pure randomness. It was like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where every piece changed shape the moment you touched it. Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet, was running out of patience. In March 1942, he told his intelligence officers in a voice tight with frustration, "Gentlemen, the Japanese are running circles around us. They know where our ships are before we do. We don't know where theirs are until they've already struck. This cannot continue." But nobody had answers worth giving. The Office of Naval Intelligence estimated it would take at least 2 more years to make meaningful progress on JN-25. And that was assuming they could recruit 50 more cryptanalysts and double their computing resources. 2 years. By then, the war might already be lost. The Pacific might be a Japanese lake, and the West Coast could be under threat. Japanese strategists were already drafting plans for their next major offensive, a strike designed to either knock America out of the Pacific entirely or lure the U.S. Navy into a trap that would finish what Pearl Harbor started. Those plans were being transmitted every single day in JN-25 traffic. The messages flowed through the airwaves, captured by listening stations scattered from Hawaii to Australia. Boxes of intercepted transmissions piled up in the basement at Pearl Harbor, and they might as well have been written in ancient hieroglyphics for all the good they did. The stakes went beyond military defeat. Every day the code stayed unbroken. American submarines hunted blindly through empty ocean. Transport convoys sailed without knowing if enemy carriers lurked over the horizon. Commanders made life-and-death decisions based on educated guesses and prayers. Men were dying because America was fighting this war, deaf, blind, and stumbling. Captain Lawrence Safford, the father of Navy the man who'd built America's code-breaking infrastructure from scratch, told his colleagues that breaking JN-25 might be mathematically impossible. The problem space was simply too vast, too chaotic. "We're looking for patterns in what appears to be pure randomness," he explained. "The additives ensure we'll never see the same encryption twice. Even if we had unlimited time and unlimited computing power, there's no guarantee we'd ever crack it." Into this atmosphere of defeat and exhaustion, into this room full of brilliant men who'd run out of ideas, walked a skinny kid from California who wasn't supposed to be there, who had no business wearing that uniform, and who was about to prove every single expert catastrophically wrong. Andrew Gleason was born on November 4, 1921, in Fresno, California, to a botanist father and a Swiss-American mother who raised him to value education and curiosity above all else. He should have been starting his freshman year of college somewhere, studying mathematics or science, living a normal teenage life. Instead, on December 8, 1941, just one day after Japanese bombs tore through Pearl Harbor, he stood in front of a Navy recruiting officer clutching a forged birth certificate that claimed he was 19 years old. He was 17. His voice hadn't finished deepening yet. He barely needed to shave. And when the recruiter looked him over with obvious skepticism, Andrew felt his heart hammering against his ribs. "You're a kind of skinny kid," the recruiter said, eyeing the teenager's thin frame. "You sure you want this?" Andrew wanted it more than he'd ever wanted anything, not just from patriotism. Though that fire burned hot in his chest after watching newsreel footage of burning battleships and men drowning in oil-slicked water, he wanted it because he was bored, crushingly and devastatingly bored with civilian life. He'd graduated from Roosevelt High School in Yonkers a full year early, spent a restless year bouncing between odd jobs, and discovered he had a peculiar talent that nobody seemed to value or understand. He could see patterns where others saw only chaos. Give him a page of scattered numbers, a broken machine, a puzzle everyone else had given up on, and his mind would automatically start organizing it, finding the hidden structure beneath the surface noise. His father thought he should wait, go to college, study properly. His mother wanted him to hold off until he was older, more mature, ready for war. But Andrew had watched those newsreels of Pearl Harbor burning, had seen the rage and fear on people's faces, and something in him snapped into sharp focus. This was real. This mattered. This was a puzzle worth solving, even if it killed him. The Navy, desperate for warm bodies after losing thousands of men at Pearl Harbor, didn't scrutinize his birth certificate too closely. By January 1942, Seaman Apprentice Gleason found himself assigned to OP-20, the Navy's cryptanalysis division, not because anyone recognized any special talent or qualification, but simply because he'd mentioned on his intake form that he enjoyed mathematics and puzzles. In the desperate scramble of early 1942, that was qualification enough. They needed everyone they could get. He arrived at the Nebraska Avenue facility in Washington, D.C., on February 3, 1942. A baby-faced kid drowning in an ill-fitting uniform, walking into a building packed with Naval Academy graduates and Ivy League mathematicians who'd spent years mastering their craft. Commander Howard Engstrom took one look at him and sighed with barely concealed disgust. "They're sending us children now." "I'm 19, sir," Andrew lied automatically, the words coming easier each time. "Sure you are," Engstrom replied without humor. "Can you type?" "Yes, sir." "Good. You'll work message sorting, 10-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Don't touch anything classified above your clearance level. Don't bother the real cryptanalysts while they're working. Just sort the intercepts by transmission, frequency, and date stamp. Think you can handle that without screwing it up?" Andrew nodded stiffly, swallowing his disappointment. It wasn't what he'd imagined when he'd forged that birth certificate. He'd pictured himself heroically cracking codes like something out of an adventure novel. But it was a start. It was a foot in the door. For 2 solid months, he sorted messages, thousands upon thousands of them. Endless sheets covered in 5-digit number groups that meant nothing to him or anyone else. He wasn't allowed anywhere near actual cryptanalysis work. He didn't have the credentials, the training, the rank, or the respect. He just sorted and filed and tried to stay invisible. Tried not to draw attention to the fact that he was the youngest person in the building by at least 3 years. But Andrew Gleason had a problem he couldn't fix. He couldn't stop noticing patterns even when he tried. It was like telling him not to breathe, not to blink. As he sorted those meaningless messages day after day, week after week, his mind kept cataloging tiny inconsistencies. Little anomalies that didn't quite fit the expected distribution. And late at night, alone in his barracks bunk while other sailors snored around him, he started writing these observations down in a notebook he technically wasn't supposed to have. He was about to stumble onto something that would reshape the entire war, and when he first tried to report it, they would tell him to shut up, sit down, and get back to his filing. It's April 1942, and Andrew Gleason has been sorting intercepted Japanese messages for 10 solid weeks, when he notices something that shouldn't be possible. It's 2 in the morning. He should be asleep in his bunk. But instead, he's in the cryptanalysis room with grudging permission from the night duty officer. A young ensign who doesn't care what the kid does, as long as he stays quiet and doesn't break anything. Andrew has spread out 60 intercepted messages across an empty desk. All of them captured from the same Japanese transmission station, all sent during the month of March, all completely indecipherable to everyone who's looked at them. Standard procedure says you look for repeated code groups if the same 5-digit number appears in multiple messages. It might represent a common word, like the or attack or carrier, but the additive encryption should make that approach impossible. The random additives should ensure that no pattern ever repeats in a recognizable way. Except Andrew has been noticing something strange about certain messages. Specifically, messages routed from Tokyo to Berlin through Japanese diplomatic channels. They have indicator codes at the beginning of each transmission, metadata that tells the receiving station how to process the message. And these indicators only seem to use the first 13 letters of the alphabet. A through M, meanwhile, messages traveling from Berlin back to Tokyo only use the last 13 letters. N through Z, it's barely noticeable, a tiny quirk buried in thousands of messages. And nobody has mentioned it in any of the analysis reports he's filed over the past 2 months. He grabs a pencil with slightly trembling fingers and starts working through a hypothesis that seems almost too simple to be real. What if, and this sounds crazy even to him, what if the unencrypted indicators follow the exact same pattern? What if Tokyo to Berlin message headers use only letters A through M in their plaintext form, and Berlin to Tokyo messages use only N through Z? If that's true, and it's a big if, And if you know the plain text structure of those indicators, you could subtract the known plain text from the encrypted indicator to recover the additive that was used. And if you have even a small piece of the additive table, you can start peeling back the encryption on the actual message content, like pulling a thread to unravel a sweater. Andrew works through the mathematics with growing excitement, his hands shaking slightly as he scribbles calculations. It's such a stupidly simple idea. Surely the real cryptanalysts, the men with doctorates and years of experience, have already thought of this and dismissed it for reasons he doesn't understand. But he checks the analysis logs anyway, flipping through weeks of reports, and finds nothing. Nobody has followed this thread. Nobody has even mentioned the alphabet split in the indicators. By 5 in the morning, as dawn starts bleeding gray light through the high windows, he's tested his hypothesis on 5 different messages, and it works. He can recover indicator additives with 73% accuracy. His crude method, using nothing but pencil, paper, and pattern recognition, has given him a foothold into the supposedly unbreakable additive system that has defeated the Navy's best minds for over a year. He needs to tell someone, but who? He's a kid, a message sorter, the lowest-ranked person in the building. The actual cryptanalysts barely acknowledge his existence, except to hand him more files. Marshall Hall Jr., one of the lead mathematicians from Yale, once told him with obvious condescension, "Son, you're here to file papers and make coffee, not to play Leave the thinking to people who actually know what they're doing." Andrew approaches Lieutenant Commander Howard Engstrom during the morning shift change, catching him just as he's pouring his first cup of terrible Navy coffee. "Sir, I think I found something significant in the JN25 traffic. The indicator headers might be using a predictable structure that we can exploit to recover the additive tables." "Not now." Gleason Engstrom cuts him off without looking up. "We're busy. There's a major operation developing, and we need all hands focused on current intercepts." "But sir, if we know the plain text structure of the indicators, we can subtract them from the encrypted versions and recover parts of the additive tables. I've tested it on 47 messages, and the math holds up." Gleason Engstrom sets down his coffee cup and fixes Andrew with a tired, irritated stare. "I'm going to say this once. You've been here 10 weeks? Agnes Driscoll has been breaking codes since before you were born. Joe Rochefort fought in the First World War. We have Yale mathematicians and Naval Academy cryptographers working 16-hour days on this problem. Do you seriously, genuinely think you've spotted something that all of them have somehow missed?" "I don't know, sir. Maybe. The math works. I can show you the calculations if you just look at my notebook." "That's enough. Get back to message sorting. That's your job. Do your job and let the experts do theirs." Andrew returns to his desk with the notebook clutched in his hands, feeling his face burn with embarrassment and frustration. The breakthrough sits there in pencil scratch. 73% validated and climbing. And nobody wants to hear about it from a 17-year-old file clerk who's not supposed to have ideas above his station. In his notes that night, he writes in angry capital letters, "They think I'm too young to matter. Maybe I am, but the math doesn't care how old I am." For 3 agonizing weeks, Andrew Gleason keeps his discovery to himself, refining it in secret during night shifts and stolen moments. He tests it on more messages, improves his accuracy rate to 81%, develops rudimentary statistical tests to validate his recovered additives. The method works. He knows it works with absolute certainty. But nobody will listen to a teenage message sorter whose voice still cracks under stress. Then, on May 11, 1942, everything changes in an instant. Admiral Chester Nimitz himself arrives at the Pearl Harbor facility for an emergency briefing, and the tension in the building spikes like static electricity before a lightning strike. Japanese radio traffic has exploded over the past week. Message volume has tripled. Something massive is coming, and everyone can feel it. Rochefort's team knows it's a major offensive. The intercepted traffic screams carrier movements and fleet concentrations, but they can't pin down the crucial details. The partially broken intercepts keep mentioning a target location designated simply as AF. But is that the Aleutian Islands? Is it Australia? Could it be Midway, or somewhere else entirely? They're flying blind at the moment. America needs clarity most. In the cramped briefing room, tension hangs thick enough to choke on. Rochefort presents what little solid intelligence they have, speaking carefully, choosing every word with precision. We're currently reading approximately 5% of current JN-5 traffic. Sir, we can confirm major carrier movements and fleet staging, but exact locations and precise timing remain unclear. The additive tables have changed 3 times in the past 2 weeks, and we can't crack them fast enough to stay current. Admiral Nimitz stares at the Pacific map on the wall, his jaw tight, and when he speaks, his voice is quiet, but carries the weight of thousands of lives. Commander, I need to know where they're hitting, and I need to know soon if I deploy the fleet to the wrong location based on guesswork. We lose the Pacific, and possibly the war. Do you understand what's at stake here? Everything depends on you, people breaking that code. Sir, we're doing everything humanly possible. We have our best people working around the clock on this problem. Andrew Gleason stands up. He doesn't plan it, doesn't think about it. His body just moves on pure instinct. Every rule of military protocol says he should sit down and shut his mouth. He's the lowest-ranked person in this room by a huge margin. He has no business speaking in front of an admiral, but the words come out anyway, pushing past the fear. Sir, I think I know how to break the additives. The room erupts instantly, officers shouting over each other in confusion and anger. Who the hell is this kid? How did a seaman apprentice get into a classified operational briefing? Rochefort looks like he's aged 10 years in 10 seconds, his face going pale. Gleason, sit down right now, Engstrom hisses through clenched teeth. You're completely out of line. But sir, I've been testing a method for 3 weeks now. The indicator headers use split alphabets, and if we exploit that pattern, we can recover the additive tables. Gleason, sit down immediately. That's a direct order from a superior officer. Nimitz holds up one hand and the room falls silent so fast it's like someone cut the sound. Let him speak. Andrew's mouth goes completely dry, his heart hammering so hard he can hear it in his ears. He's never spoken to an admiral before, never addressed anyone above the rank of lieutenant commander. He can feel every eye in the room boring into him, judging him, waiting for him to fail. His voice cracks as he starts talking, and he hates himself for it. Sir, the indicator headers in Tokyo to Berlin traffic use split alphabets, A through M in one direction, N through Z in the other. If we assume the plaintext follows the same predictable pattern, we can subtract known plaintext from encrypted indicators to recover the additive tables by simple mathematical subtraction. I've tested this method on 47 intercepted messages, with 81% accuracy in recovering additives. Once we have even partial additive tables, we can begin stripping encryption from operational traffic and reading their fleet movements in near real. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Dyer, one of Rochefort's senior cryptanalysts and one of the few men in the room who's always treated Andrew with basic respect, leans forward suddenly. Wait, say that again about the alphabet split. Say it slower so I can follow the logic. Andrew repeats the explanation, speaking faster now as confidence builds, showing them his notebook filled with calculations and statistical validations. The mathematics spill out in a rush, pattern recognition principles, frequency analysis, techniques, validation methods. It's crude compared to the elegant theoretical approaches the Yale mathematicians prefer. But it's concrete, it's testable, and most importantly, it works on real intercepted traffic. Dyer grabs the notebook from Andrew's hands, scanning the pages rapidly, and his eyes go wide. Joe, look at this right now. The kid might actually be onto something real here. Marshall Hall Jr. crowds in, then Agnes Driscoll, the legendary Madam X herself. They pass the notebook around the table, checking calculations, testing assumptions against their own mental models, arguing in quick technical shorthand that Andrew can barely follow. The room divides instantly into 2 camps. Half the officers think this is insane, a desperate waste of precious time based on hunches from an unqualified child, who doesn't understand the complexities involved. The other half sees exactly what Andrew sees, a genuine crack in the fortress wall they've been throwing themselves against for over a year. This is absolutely insane, Captain Joseph Finnegan says, shaking his head in disbelief. We're going to bet the entire Pacific Fleet, bet thousands of American lives. On the hunches of a teenage file clerk who's been here less than 3 months. It's not a hunch, Dyer counters firmly. The underlying mathematics are sound. I've checked his work, and it holds up under scrutiny. We can test this methodology right now on current intercepts and validate it within 72 hours. On what timeline? Finnegan shoots back. Nimitz needs actionable intelligence in weeks, not months. We don't have time to chase dead ends based on amateur theories. So we work faster. We dedicate resources. We make this the top priority, Rochefort interjects. If this method has even a 20% chance of working, we have to pursue it aggressively. Rochefort turns to look at Andrew, really looks at him for the first time with genuine attention and curiosity. Gleason, how old are you really? No bullshit this time? The room goes quiet, everyone waiting for the answer. Andrew feels his forged birth certificate burning a metaphorical hole in his personnel file somewhere in this building. 19, sir, unhung, and I'm the Queen of England. Rochefort turns to Admiral Nimitz with something like grim amusement on his exhausted face. Sir, I don't care if this kid is 12 years old. If his method works even partially, it might give us the breakthrough we desperately need to win this war. Nimitz studies Andrew for what feels like an eternity, his expression unreadable, weighing the teenager against the stakes of the entire Pacific campaign, and then he nods once, sharply. Test it. You have 72 hours, starting right now. If it works, I want every available cryptanalyst in this facility implementing Gleason's method immediately around the clock. If it doesn't work, we'll reassess our entire approach. Dismissed. He doesn't finish the alternative because he doesn't need to. Everyone in the room understands the stakes perfectly. 72 hours to crack the uncrackable or watch America lose the Pacific. Andrew Gleason doesn't sleep for the next 3 days, and neither does anyone else on the cryptanalysis team. They divide into 2 parallel groups. One continuing traditional brute force attacks on JN-25 using established methods that have failed for over a year. The other testing Andrew's indicator subtraction technique on every piece of intercepted traffic they can get their hands on. The kid who was sorting messages and making coffee 3 weeks ago now sits at a table with Agnes Driscoll, Marshall Hall Jr., and Tom Dyer, working alongside the best codebreakers in the American military as equals for the first time. Driscoll handles him roughly at first. She's been breaking Japanese, German, and Italian codes for 2 decades. She's forgotten more about cryptanalysis than most people will ever learn in their entire careers. And she doesn't suffer fools gladly or at all. She especially doesn't suffer teenage boys who think they've discovered something everyone else somehow missed through sheer beginner's luck or arrogance. But as they work through intercept after intercept, message after message, testing Andrew's hypothesis against real-world data, her attitude begins to shift noticeably. The method works. It actually works consistently. And more than that, it's faster than anything they've tried before by orders of magnitude. Within 16 hours, working in rotating shifts that blur into one continuous effort, they've recovered enough additive fragments to begin stripping partial encryption from current operational traffic. By hour 36, they're reading fragments of Japanese fleet orders, broken pieces that reference carrier divisions, refueling schedules, and operational timelines. By hour 60, they've decoded enough clean text to confirm Rochefort's deepest suspicion with absolute certainty. AF is Midway Island, a tiny atoll 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii that most Americans couldn't find on a map. The Japanese are planning a massive carrier strike in early June, 4 to 6 fleet carriers supported by dozens of cruisers, destroyers, and battleships, plus an amphibious invasion force of thousands of troops to capture the island and use it as a forward base for operations against Hawaii itself. Nimitz receives the full intelligence brief on May 14, 1942, and the information transforms everything in an instant. He has the target location, the approximate timing within a 3-day window, the force composition down to individual ship, classes, everything he needs to plan a perfect ambush instead of reacting blindly to Japanese initiatives. He orders 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, the latter barely patched together from catastrophic damage suffered in the Coral Sea battle just days earlier, to position themselves northeast of Midway in absolute radio silence and wait. The Japanese have no idea they're sailing into a carefully prepared trap. They believe their codes are mathematically unbreakable. They think they'll achieve complete tactical surprise like they did at Pearl Harbor, but the intelligence keeps flowing in like a river breaking through a dam. And it's Andrew Gleason's indicator subtraction method that's unlocking it message by message, hour by hour. By May 27th, OP-20G is reading 40% of current JN-25 traffic, an absolutely unprecedented breakthrough that gives American commanders a crystal-clear picture of Japanese intentions for the first time in the entire war. They identify the specific carrier divisions participating in the operation: Akagi Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, all veterans of the Pearl Harbor attack that started this nightmare. They learned the names of the flagship commanders, the planned attack timeline down to the hour. Even details about which aircraft squadrons will strike first and what their targets will be. On the morning of June 4, 1942, decoded intercepts confirm in real time that Japanese pilots are being briefed for dawn strikes against Midway's airfield installations and fuel storage, giving American forces final tactical warning. June 4, 1942, at exactly 10:26 in the morning, dive bombers from Enterprise in Yorktown, guided by intelligence from broken codes and desperate aerial searches, catch 3 Japanese fleet carriers with their decks absolutely packed with armed and fueled aircraft being prepared for a second strike wave. In 5 catastrophic minutes that changed the entire war, Akagi Kaga and Soryu transform into burning wrecks, their hangar decks exploding from ignited aviation fuel and bomb. Magazine detonations that send flames hundreds of feet into the Pacific sky. Hiryu, separated from the main formation, launches a desperate counterattack that cripples Yorktown with multiple torpedo hits, but American bombers hunt her down in the afternoon like wolves tracking wounded prey and send her to the bottom as well. By sunset on June 4th, 4 Japanese fleet carriers are sinking into the Pacific, taking with them 248 aircraft, 3,057 men, and Japan's most experienced carrier pilots who took years to train and cannot possibly be replaced. The Battle of Midway isn't just a tactical victory or even a strategic success. It's the absolute turning point of the Pacific War, the moment when Japanese expansion stops permanently and reversal begins. Before Midway, Japan held complete initiative across the Pacific, choosing when and where to strike, while America reacted desperately and scrambled to respond. After Midway, Japan is permanently on the defensive for the rest of the war, their carrier strength shattered beyond any hope of repair, their operational plans exposed to American intelligence that reads their communications in near. And it happened because a 17-year-old kid with a forged birth certificate and an unusual talent for seeing patterns in chaos noticed something about indicator headers that used split alphabets, something so simple that everyone else had missed it. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of World War II heroes who changed history against impossible odds, hit that subscribe button right now. We upload brand new documentaries every single week, exploring the people and moments that shaped our world. The stories you never learned in school, the individuals who made the impossible happen when everything seemed lost. Don't miss the next one, because history is full of moments like this. After the stunning and decisive victory at Midway, OP-2OG transforms almost overnight from a struggling backwater operation into an intelligence factory operating at peak wartime efficiency. Andrew's indicator subtraction method evolves rapidly into a comprehensive systematic approach for attacking Japanese additive tables. The team develops mechanical aids using early IBM tabulators, adapted specifically for cryptanalytic work, processing thousands of intercepted messages in the time it used to take to manually analyze just dozens. By August 1942, they're reading 60% of JN-25 traffic on a regular basis. By October, 75%. By early 1943, they're reading nearly everything the Japanese Navy transmits, and the intelligence saves thousands of American lives month after month. On August 24, 1942, decoded JN-25 traffic reveals detailed Japanese plans to land major troop reinforcements at Guadalcanal to overwhelm the outnumbered Marine positions clinging to Henderson Field. American naval forces intercept the troop convoys at the Battle of the Eastern Solomons. The Japanese lose a light carrier and dozens of precious transport ships loaded with men, equipment, and supplies that never reach their destination. On October 26th, advance warning from JN-25 decrypts allows American carriers to set up a perfect ambush of a Japanese task force at the Battle of Santa Cruz. The fight is brutal and costly on both sides, with heavy losses. But American forces engage with their eyes open, knowing exactly what's coming, while Japanese, commanders operate on faulty assumptions that prove fatally wrong. The kill ratios flipped completely and permanently. In 1941, Japan was sinking 3 American warships for every one they lost, absolutely dominating Pacific waters through superior tactics, better training, and crucially, better intelligence. By late 1942, America is sinking to Japanese ships for every one lost, and the trend accelerates dramatically from there as American industry and intelligence combine into an unstoppable force. Submarine warfare transforms entirely and becomes Japan's nightmare. U.S. submarines equipped with decoded Japanese convoy routes, precise sailing schedules, and patrol patterns begin a systematic campaign of destruction that slowly strangles Japan's entire war economy. In 1941, American submarines sank 180,000 tons of Japanese merchant shipping, a respectable but not strategically decisive number. In 1943, armed with precise JN-25 intelligence, telling them exactly where convoys will be and exactly when they'll pass through specific coordinates, American submarines sink 1.5 million tons of shipping. Japan's entire war economy begins to strangle and collapse. Oil from captured fields in the Dutch East Indies can't reach Japanese refineries because tankers keep getting torpedoed in exactly the right places at exactly the right times. Troops fighting desperate battles in New Guinea, the Philippines, and scattered Pacific islands run chronically short of food, ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcements because transport ships never arrive at their destinations, sunk by submarines that knew precisely where to wait. All because American cryptanalysts can read Japanese naval communications better than some Japanese officers can. Even the Japanese notice something is terribly, impossibly wrong, though they can't identify the exact source of the problem. A personal diary recovered from a Japanese naval officer killed during fighting in late 1943 contains a haunting, desperate entry. The Americans seem to know our fleet movements before we execute them. How is this even possible? Our naval codes are supposed to be mathematically unbreakable. Our communication officers assure us repeatedly, with absolute confidence, that enemy cryptanalysis is impossible given the complexity of our cipher systems. Yet somehow their submarines are always waiting in perfect ambush positions. Their carriers always appear in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. It is as if they can read our private thoughts before we even think them, as if they have access to our operational plans before our own captains do. They could read those thoughts. They did have access to those plans. American cryptanalysts were reading every message, every operational order, every fleet movement directive, every convoy route assignment, all decoded within hours of transmission, translated into English, and delivered to American commanders who used the intelligence to devastating effect. In November 1943, Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz visits the OP to OG cryptanalysis facility at Pearl Harbor for a second time since the war began. The team has just provided the precise intelligence that allowed U.S. Army Air Force fighters to intercept and kill Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, shooting down his transport aircraft over Bougainville in a mission timed so precisely it seemed like magic or prophecy to those who didn't know about the systematically broken codes. Nimitz walks slowly through the cramped basement facilities, personally shaking hands with exhausted cryptanalysts who work in shifts and rarely see actual daylight. And he stops deliberately at Andrew Gleason's desk in the corner. Gleason, now officially listed as 19 years old in his records, but actually still only 18, snaps immediately to rigid attention. "At ease," son Nimitz says quietly, in a voice meant only for Andrew's ears. "I've read all the detailed reports about Midway, about your breakthrough work on JN-25 and what it's meant strategically for this entire war. Do you fully understand and comprehend what you accomplished here?" "We broke their code, sir," Andrew replies simply, uncertain what else the Admiral wants to hear from him. "You did far more than that. You did something infinitely more important," Nimitz says with absolute conviction. "You saved the Pacific Fleet from potential destruction at Midway. You probably saved tens of thousands of American lives over the past year. You gave us the intelligence advantage that's allowing us to actually win this war instead of just surviving it. How old are you really, son? And don't lie to a fleet admiral." Andrew hesitates because the truth seems almost absurd now after everything that's happened. After Midway and all the decoded messages and all the lives saved, 18, sir. I'll be 19 in a few weeks. Nimitz smiles slightly, a sad smile that carries the weight of too many young men sent into harm's way. When this war finally ends, whenever that is, you're going to college. That's a direct order from me to you personally. Men with gifts like yours shouldn't be filing messages or even breaking codes forever. You should be teaching cryptanalysis and advanced mathematics to the next generation of codebreakers and mathematicians. He pauses, his expression hardening as he thinks about the brutal fighting still ahead. But for now, right now, keep breaking their codes. Keep giving us that crucial intelligence edge. We're counting on you and every single person in this room to help us win. The war in the Pacific still has 2 long, brutal, bloody years ahead, island by island, beachhead by beachhead, casualty by casualty. But from June 1942 onward, from that moment at Midway, America fights with its eyes wide open instead of stumbling blind through the dark. And every victory, every saved transport convoy, every successful ambush, every air raid that catches Japanese forces completely by surprise, traces back in some part to a teenager who lied about his age and accidentally cracked a code that the world's best mathematicians said was mathematically unbreakable. This is exactly the kind of history they don't teach in traditional textbooks. Real people making impossible decisions under incredible pressure. Teenagers changing the actual course of wars. Moments when everything hangs on one person refusing to stay silent when everyone tells them they don't matter. If you're enjoying this deep dive into authentic military history, hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves World War II stories and untold history. And definitely check out our video on the Battle of Midway itself to see exactly how Andrew's intelligence changed everything on that crucial day in June 1942 when the war turned. When World War II finally ends in August 1945 after atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, forcing Japan's unconditional surrender, Andrew Gleason faces a choice that will define the entire rest of his life. The Navy desperately wants him to stay on. The newly formed National Security Agency needs experienced cryptanalysts who deeply understand modern cipher systems and can anticipate future threats. They offer him immediate officer rank with substantial pay, guaranteed promotions, and a secure career in the classified shadows serving his country for decades. But Admiral Nimitz's direct order from 1943 echoes constantly in his mind like a voice he can't ignore. You're going to college, that's an order. He enrolls at Yale University in the fall of 1946 as a regular freshman. Starting from the absolute beginning, despite having already done cryptanalytic work that most PhD mathematicians would struggle to replicate even with unlimited time. He never talks about his war service with curious classmates or interested professors. The code-breaking work remains classified at the highest possible levels for decades, and his fellow students have absolutely no idea that the quiet, serious, slightly awkward guy sitting in their calculus lectures helped win the Battle of Midway and crack Japan's supposedly unbreakable naval code when he was just 17 years old. But the war changed him fundamentally and forever in ways he's still discovering. Those intense months in that basement room at Pearl Harbor showed him exactly what mathematics could accomplish when applied to concrete problems with genuine life-or-death stakes. Not abstract pure theory pursued for its own elegant sake or academic prestige, but real puzzles where the correct solutions saved actual lives and changed the course of human history. He completes his undergraduate degree at Yale in 1949 and immediately joins Harvard's prestigious mathematics department, where he will spend the next 4 productive decades solving problems that everyone else believes are completely impossible, developing revolutionary theories that reshape entire fields of mathematical study. In 1952, he solves Hilbert's fifth problem, one of the most famous unsolved challenges in all of mathematics that had stumped brilliant minds for over 50 years. In 1957, he publishes what becomes known as Gleason's theorem, groundbreaking work that revolutionizes the mathematical foundations of quantum mechanics. His pioneering contributions to Ramsey theory, coding theory, and mathematical education influence entire generations of students and researchers who never know about his teenage code-breaking heroics. He wins the prestigious Newcomb-Cleveland Prize for Scientific Achievement, serves as president of the American Mathematical Society, and holds the distinguished Hollis Chair of Mathematics at Harvard University for decades. But the code-breaking work stays completely classified, locked away in government vaults. Until 1996, when the NSA finally begins systematically declassifying World War II cryptanalysis records for historical research. Academic researchers and military historians finally learn the full detailed story of JN-25, the struggles of OP to OG, and the indicator subtraction method that cracked the Japanese naval code and changed the entire course of the Pacific War. Andrew Gleason's name appears prominently in the newly declassified historical reports, though by then he's in his mid-70s, long retired from active teaching, and far more interested in mentoring young mathematicians than rehashing old wartime glories from 5 decades past. In a rare 1998 interview about his classified war work, conducted shortly before his health began declining, Gleason reflected with characteristic modesty, "I was young and stupid and incredibly lucky. Nothing more than that. The real heroes were the people like Rochefort and Driscoll and Dyer, who'd been fighting that brutal code for years before I even showed up. I just happened to notice something small that they'd been too busy and too focused to see clearly. If anything, it proves that sometimes you desperately need fresh eyes on a stubborn problem." The experts had been staring at JN-25 for so long, they couldn't see past their own assumptions and established methods. Sometimes the solution is simpler than anyone wants to believe. The numbers tell the story far better than any words can. Before Andrew Gleason's indicator breakthrough in May 1942, OP2OG could read approximately 5% of current JN-25 traffic at best. After implementing his method systematically across the entire operation, that percentage jumped to 40% within mere weeks and reached 75% by year's end. Military historians and cryptanalysis experts estimate that the JN-25 intelligence directly contributed to sinking over 800 Japanese naval and merchant vessels, saving at least 50,000 American and Allied lives through better tactical decisions, and potentially shortening the entire Pacific War by 18 months or more through superior strategic intelligence. Andrew Gleason died peacefully on October 17, 2008, at age 86, in his home surrounded by family. His obituaries in major newspapers focused almost entirely on his towering mathematical achievements. Hilbert's fifth problem, his revolutionary quantum mechanics work, his transformative education reforms that changed how mathematics is taught. Most obituaries didn't even mention the war years at all. Most readers didn't know the classified story. But deep in the Cryptologic Museum at NSA headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, there's a small permanent display dedicated to the breaking of JN-25 during World War II. It mentions Agnes Driscoll, Joe Rochefort, Marshall Hall Jr., Thomas Dyer, and other legends of American cryptanalysis who fought that code for years. And tucked in one corner of that display, there's a faded black and white photograph of a baby-faced kid in an ill-fitting Navy uniform that's clearly too big for his thin frame, standing awkwardly in front of a desk covered in sheets of 5-digit number groups. The printed caption reads simply, "Seaman Andrew M. Gleason, OP2OG, 1942. His indicator subtraction method helped break JN-25 and provided crucial intelligence for the Battle of Midway." It doesn't mention that he was only 17 when that photo was taken. It doesn't mention the forged birth certificate or the voice that cracked under pressure. But the cryptanalysis historians know the full story now, and now you know it too. The lesson here isn't really about lying to join the military, though thousands of young American men did exactly that during World War II out of patriotism and desperation to serve. The real lesson is about what becomes possible when someone refuses to accept that a problem is truly unsolvable, when fresh eyes look at old assumptions without the burden of established expertise, when a kid who's not supposed to be in the room speaks up anyway, despite every rule, telling him to stay silent. The code wasn't really unbreakable after all. Nobody's code ever is. It just needed someone who didn't know it was supposed to be impossible, someone who could see the pattern everyone else had missed. And sometimes, when everything is on the line and the experts have run out of ideas, that's all it takes to change the world. One teenager, one pattern, one moment of courage. That day at Midway didn't just change the war, it changed every man who lived to tell the story. And the intelligence that made it possible came from a kid who saw what no one else could see. The guns eventually fell silent across the Pacific, but their echoes still whisper through history, reminding us that genius and courage don't always come with age or credentials. Sometimes they come from the most unlikely places, from the youngest voices, from the people we least expect, and that's a truth worth remembering.